check this out. BCM right here, bringing you another Commander deck tech. And today we are looking at Serah Farron, Selesnya colored Legendaries Matters build. So we're going to use every possible legendary creature and try to develop a very large board with all these very powerful legends. That way we can gain life, draw cards, take over the game, and just pretty much do everything that we can possibly think of. But Serah Farron herself, she has a static ability where the very first legendary creature spell you cast each turn will cost 2 colors less to cast. And then at the beginning of combat, as long as we control 2 or more legendary creatures, we can transform Serah Farron into Crystallized Serah. She'll become a legendary artifact with the same static ability of our first legendary creature spell we cast each turn. Will cost 2 colors less to cast, but she's going to give every single legendary creature +2/+2. That way we can buff up our board even more. So let's get right into this. First up are all the creatures. We do have one singular mana dork, and that is Delighted Halfling. This is single-handedly the best mana dork in Commander right now. She will tap to add a colorless mana, but more importantly, we're going to add 1 mana of any color that we can only use that mana to cast legendary spells, and then that legendary spell cannot be countered. Now we have all the legends. So we have Yoshimaru, Ever Faithful. This is probably the best 1-drop we can possibly play. Whenever another legendary permanent enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1 counter on Yoshimaru. Now we have Shalinda, Yavon Acolyte. This is a 2/2 with lifelink, and whenever another creature we control enters, we get to put a +1 counter on that creature. And our main premise for dealing as much damage as possible is utilizing +1 counters on every single creature that we can possibly put them on. And then if that creature's power is less than Shalinda's power, we get to put the +1 counter on Shalinda herself. Now we have Reki, the History of Kamigawa. Anytime we cast a legendary spell, we get to draw a card. We're going to be drawing lots of cards with Reki. Now we have Thalia, Heretic Cathar. Creatures and non-basic lands our opponents control will enter the battlefield tapped. This is really going to slow down our opponents because we're going to keep that tempo and run over our opponents as fast as possible. Of course, we have Heliod Suncrown. Most of our creatures do have lifelink or some ways to gain us life, and anytime we gain life, we get to put a +1 counter on any creature or enchantment we control. We can also pay a colorless and a white to give another creature that doesn't have lifelink. Now we have Kutzil, Melamet Exemplar. This is going to slow down our opponents as well, because our opponents won't be able to cast spells during our turn. And then whenever 1 or more creatures we control with power greater than its base power deals combat damage, we get to draw a card. Now we have Legolas, Greenleaf. This is a 2/2 with reach. He can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And then whenever another legendary creature enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1 counter on Legolas. And then whenever he deals combat damage, we get to draw a card. Now we have Aerith Gainsborough. This is a 2/2 with lifelink as well. Then whenever we gain life, we get to put a +1 counter on Aerith. And whenever she's put into a graveyard, we get to move all those +1 counters on each legendary creature we control, where X is the number of +1 counters on Aerith. Now we have Meister Seymour. He's going to synergize really well with all these +1 counters because we're going to use this monstrous ability where we're going to put a whole bunch of +1 counters on Meister Seymour. So we're going to pay 3 colorless and 2 green for his monstrous X ability, where we're going to put X +1 counters on himself, where X is the number of +1 counters on every single creature we control. And then every single combat, we get to put any number of +1 counters equal to his power. Now we have Elena, Turk Recruit. When she enters the battlefield, we get to return any non-assassin historic card from our graveyard back to our hand. And anytime we cast a historic spell, we get to put a +1 counter on Elena. A historic spell is anything that's an artifact, a legendary, or a saga. Okay, now we have Lae'zel, Vlaakith's Champion. He kind of has a hardened scales static ability where if we would put one or more counters on a creature, planeswalker, or on ourselves, we get to put that many +1 instead. Now we have Tromo, Seymour's Butler. Each other non-token creature we control will enter the battlefield with an additional +1 counter on it, but we can pay 1 colorless, tap him, and we get to proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures that entered the battlefield that turn. Now we have Gada and Luzi. This has flash, so we can cast it as though it was an instant, and when Gada and Luzi enters the battlefield, we get to choose target creature we control. If damage would be dealt to that creature, we're going to prevent that and put that many +1 counters on it. Now we have Arwen, Weaver of Hope. Each other creature will enter the battlefield with additional counters on it equal to her toughness. So if we can put even more +1 counters on Arwen, every single creature that enters the battlefield from there on out will enter the battlefield with even more +1 counters on it. Now we have Aladbree, Korvac Doll. We get to look at the top card of our library at any time. We can cast creature spells from the top of our library, and then we can pay 1 green mana, tap him to tap 2 untapped creatures we control. Then we can reveal a card from our hand or the top of our library. If it was a creature card, we get to put that card on the battlefield. Of course, we have Captain Sisay. We're going to activate her, search our library for a legend card, and put that into our hand. Now we have Shalai, Voice of Plenty. She's going to do a real good job at protecting our board. Apart from being a 3/4 flyer, us, planeswalkers, and other creatures we control will have hexproof, so our opponents can't target them. Or we can pay 4 colorless and 2 green to put a +1 counter on each creature we control. Now we have Yeva, Nature's Herald. This has flash, but she's going to give the ability that every single green creature we cast will have flash as well. So majority of our creatures are green or they're hybrid. That way we can cast them anytime we want to. Now we have Sigarda, Fawn of Blessings. Other permanents we control have hexproof as well, but we can look at the top card at any time, and we can cast angels and human spells from among them. Now we have Toski, Bearer of Secrets. He can't be countered, he's indestructible. He does have to attack every single combat, but whenever any creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Now we have Yasharn, Implaceable Earth. When he enters the battlefield, we get to search our library for a basic forest card and a basic plains card, and those get put into our hand. But he's going to shut down our opponents from being able to pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents in order to activate abilities or cast spells. Now we have Waka, Devoted Guardian. This is a 4/4 with reach and trample, and whenever he deals combat damage, we get to destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls. Then we get to put a +1 counter on Waka. He also has what's called Blitzball Captain. At the beginning of our end step, if a counter was put on Waka, then we get to put a +1 counter on each other creature we control. Now we have Sigarda, Host of Herons. This is a 5/5 angel with flying and hexproof itself, but spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. Of course, we have Lyra Dawnbringer. This is just a very powerful angel. It has flying, first strike, and lifelink, and then other angels will get +1/+1 and have lifelink. Now we have Karametra, God of Harvest. This is not a creature until your devotion is 7, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card and put it onto the battlefield tab. Now we have Gaudy Turtle Oketra. This is a very powerful card. This is a 3/6 with double strike, and anytime we cast a creature spell, we're going to create a 4/4 black zombie with vigilance, and our opponents are going to have a hard time dealing with this creature because if it would be put into a graveyard or exile from the battlefield, we get to put it third from the top of our library. Now we have Thancred Waters. This has flash as well, so we can cast it anytime we can cast an instant. He also has a static ability called Royal Guard. When he enters the battlefield, another target legendary permanent we control will gain indestructible for as long as we control Thancred Waters. And then whenever we cast a non-creature spell, he will gain indestructible himself. Now we have Gandalf the White. This is flash, and we can cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had flash as well. And then if a legendary permanent or artifact entering or leaving the battlefield would cause a triggered ability of that permanent to trigger, it'll trigger a additional time. And because we're dealing with +1 counters, we have Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. This is a very large creature. It's a 6/6 with trample and haste, and if we would put one or more counters on a permanent, we put twice that many instead. And if an opponent would put +1 counters on permanents, they put half that many. Now we have Dragon Lord Dramoka. He can't be countered. He's a 5/7 with flying and lifelink, and your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Now we have Aragorn and Arwen. This is a 3/6 with vigilance. Whenever Aragorn and Arwen enter the battlefield or attacks, you get to put a +1 counter on it for each other creature you control, and then you're going to gain 1 life for each other creature you control. Now we have Surrak and Goreclaw. This is a 6/5 with trample. He's going to give all our other creatures trample, and whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1 counter on it, and that creature gains haste. Now we have Kogla, the Titan Ape. When this enters the battlefield, it's going to fight another target creature you don't control, and whenever he attacks, you get to destroy target artifact or enchantment that defending player controls. And if we need to protect Kogla, we can pay a colorless and a green. Then we can return another human we control, and he'll gain indestructible until the end of turn. Now we have Galta and Mavrin. This one is very, very fun. Whenever we attack, we can choose one of these different abilities. Either we can create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur with trample, where X is the greatest power among attacking creatures we control, or we can create X11 vampires with lifelink, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Now we have Avacyn, Angel of Hope. She's probably the best way to protect our board, because other permanents we control are indestructible. She is an 8/8 with flying, vigilance, and indestructible herself. So we're going to need as many cost reductions as possible to get her on the battlefield as fast as possible. Now, because we are dealing with +1 counters, we have Walking Ballista. This also goes infinite with Heliod, because all we have to do is have 2 +1 counters on Walking Ballista, give Walking Ballista lifelink from Heliod, then we can deal 1 damage because we gained a life. We get to put a +1 counter on a creature. We're going to put that +1 counter on Walking Ballista, and just repeat this process until you either gained infinite life or you dealt infinite damage to all your other opponents. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. First up, we have Hardened Scales. Because our primary focus is +1 counters, if 1 or more +1 counters would be put on a creature, we put that many counters on that creature +1. Now we have Flowering of the White Tree. Because we are a legendary build, we're really going to benefit from Flowering of the White Tree, because legendary creatures will get +2/+1 and have ward 1. So our opponents have to pay 1 colorless to target any of our legends. And our non-legendary creatures, which we don't have too many of them, will get +1. Now we have Sphere Grid. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage, we get to put a +1 counter on that creature. It also has a unlock ability where creatures we control that have +1 counters on them will have reach and trample. Now we have my personal favorite, we have Aura Shards. Whenever any creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now we have Branching Evolution. This one is similar to Hardened Scales. If one or more +1 counters would be put on a creature, twice that many are put on instead. Now we have Strength of the Harvest. This is what's called a MDFC, so you can play it as a land, or you can enchant a creature, and that enchanted creature will get +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment we control. Now we have War of the Last Alliance. This is what's called a saga, so we go through the different chapters by putting lore counters on them, and once we do, we get that ability from that chapter. And when the last chapter is reached, we get to sacrifice it. But chapter 1, we get to search our library for a legendary creature and put it into our hand. It's the same thing for chapter 2. And then when we get to chapter 3, creatures we control will gain double strike until the end of turn, and the ring will tempt us. Now we have Leyline of Sanctity. You can put this on the battlefield if it's in your opening hand, but we have hexproof. That way our opponents can't target us whatsoever. Now we have Valkyrie's Call. Anytime a non-token, non-angel creature you control would be put into a graveyard, you get to return that creature back to the battlefield with a +1 counter on it. It'll have flying and be an angel in addition to its other types. So we're going to get value even if our creatures are put into a graveyard. They'll just come right back, assuming they're not angels. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. Most of these are mana rocks, so we probably have the best one because we're all legends, is Mox Amber. We're going to add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures or planeswalkers we control. Of course, we have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. Now we have Relic of Legends. This will tap to add any mana of any color, but we can tap an untapped legendary creature to add 1 mana as well. Now we have Mithril Coat. We're going to throw this on whatever creature we want. This does have flash as well, so we can cast it as an instant. It's indestructible itself. When it enters the battlefield, we can attach this to a legendary creature without paying its equip cost. And the equipped creature will have indestructible when it's equipped. Now, to stay on the +1 counters theme, we have the Earth Crystal. This is a cost reduction for all our green spells, but if 1 or more counters would be put on a creature, we put twice that many instead, or we can pay 4 colorless and 2 green. We're going to activate this. We're going to put 2 +1 counters on up to 2 target creatures we control. Now we have Hero's Podium. Each legendary creature we control will get +1/+1 for each other legendary creature we control, and then as much mana as we want to pay into this, we can pay X, activate it, look at the top X cards, and then we reveal a legendary creature from among those and put it into our hand. Okay, let's get into the instance. We have our Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile as our removal spells. We have more protection spells than we do removal. So we have Heroic Intervention. Permanents we control will gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. Similar to that, we have Dawn's Truce. Us and permanents will gain hexproof until the end of turn. This has Gift a Card, so if you allow your opponent to draw a card as you cast this, permanents will gain indestructible as well. Of course, we have Teferi's Protection. Our life total can't change. We have protection from everything, and all permanents will phase out. Now we have Clever Concealment. This does cost 2 colorless and 2 white, but it does have Convoke, so we can tap any number of creatures if they share a color with it to reduce this cost. We can actually tap enough creatures that are white to reduce this to 0, but any number of target non-land permanents we control will phase out. Okay, let's get into the sorceries, because most of our legends do kind of have a higher mana cost. We have a couple ramp spells. So we have Nature's Lore. We get to search our library for a forest card and put it on the battlefield. Similar to that, we have 3 visits. We have Time of Need. We get to search our library for any legendary creature and put that into our hand. It's kind of like a green demonic tutor. Or we have Green Sun Zenith. We're going to search our library for a green creature with mana cost X or less. X is however much mana you pay into it. But what really makes Green Sun Zenith even better is the fact it's going to shuffle itself back into your library. That way you can use it over and over. Now we have Urza's Ruinous Blast. If we need to get rid of all our opponent's stuff, we're going to exile all non-land permanents that are not legendary. Luckily, 99% of all our stuff is legendary. Now we have Kamal's Druidic Vow. This is a legendary sorcery, so we do have to control a legendary creature or planeswalker as we cast this. But we're going to pay 2 green and X. We get to look at the top X cards, and we can put any number of land or legendary permanents with mana cost X or less on the battlefield. Okay, let's get into the land base. We have our command tower. Now we have Plasma Heroes. This will tap to add 1 colorless, or we can tap to add 1 mana of any color that we can only use on legendary spells, or we can tap to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents we control, or we can pay 3, we can exile Plasma Heroes, and then target legendary creature will gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. Now we have Path of Ancestry. This will enter tapped, but it'll add 1 mana of any color, which is your commander's identity. And then if that mana was used to cast a creature that shares the same type as your commander, we get to scry 1. Now we have Windswept Teeth. That way we can go get any forest or plains card. So you could go get Temple Garden, Lush Portico. This is a surveil land, so when it enters the battlefield, we get to look at the top card. We can choose to leave that card on top or put it into our graveyard. Now we have Canopy Vista. This will enter tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. We have our Battle Bond land with Bountiful Promenade. We have our Hushwood Verge. This will tap for a green, but it can tap for a white as long as we control a forest or plains. We have our Speed land with Razor Verge Thicket. The first 3 turns, this will enter untapped. Now we have Sun Petal Grove. This will enter tapped unless we control a forest or plains. Now we have our Filter land with Wooded Bastion. We have our Reveal land with Fortified Village. This will enter tapped unless we reveal a forest or plains from our hand. Now we have Brushland. This will tap for a colorless, or we can add a green or white, but it'll deal 1 damage to us. Now we have Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. This is going to ensure that every single land we control is a forest. Now we have Branchloft Pathway. We can choose to have this tap for green mana, or if we play it on the other side, we can have it tap for a white mana. Now we have Monumental Henge. This will enter tapped unless we control a plains. It'll add 1 white mana, or we can pay 2 colorless and 2 white. We get to look at the top 5 cards of our library, and we can reveal a historic card from among them and put that into our hand. Now we have Minas Tirith. This will enter tapped unless we control a legendary creature. That shouldn't be a problem. It'll tap for a white mana, or we can pay a colorless and a white. We can draw a card, but we can only activate this if we attacked with 2 or more creatures that turn. Now we have Mossword Bridge. This is what's called a hideaway land. This has hideaway 4. So when it enters, we get to look at the top 4 cards and put 1 of those on the bottom face down in exile. It'll enter tap, but it'll tap for green mana. Then we can pay 1 green, activate this, and we can play the exile card. But we can only do that if we have total power of 10 among creatures we control. Now we have Okina, Temple to the Grandfathers. This will add a green mana, but we can pay 1 green, tap it, and target legendary creature will get +1/+1 until the end of turn. Since we're going to be drawing lots of cards, we have Reliquary Tower. We have no maximum hand size, so we can keep all those cards we draw in our hand. Now we have Rogue's Passage. This is a good way to push through damage because we're going to pay 4 colorless, activate this, and target creature is unblockable that turn. Now we have Gavany Township. We're going to pay 2 colorless and Selesnya, and we're going to put a +1 counter on each creature we control. Now we have Clive's Hideaway. This has Hideaway as well, so we get to look at the top 4 cards. and put one of those cards face down. And then we can pay 2 colors. We can play the exile card without paying its mana cost, as long as we control 4 or more legendary creatures. We have 5 forests, 5 plains. And that was the Commander deck tech for Serah Farron. I really hope you guys enjoy this Legendary Matters green-white build. This seems like a very powerful build, and we'll get to do a whole bunch of very fun stuff just utilizing legends. But let me know in the comments below if you guys have any suggestion on how to speed this up, or if you really like this build. Let me know. I'll leave the link to the deck list in the comments below via Moxfield. But until next time, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.